Okay, it worked. Um, Today we are talking about astrological calendars and how to use them to work with the void of course moon. Um, I think you will find that knowing a little bit about the void of course moon will help you a lot with decision making and with planning. So it's a useful thing to know, and you don't need to be an astrologer to know it. You just need somebody to explain how void of course moon data is handled by an astrological calendar or by an ephemeris, and that's what I'm here to do today. But first, a little bit about the moon itself. The moon is very powerful in astrology. It is almost the size of the sun, and it would be nice if she were exactly the size of the sun in some ways, but since she rules our feelings, our emotions, our emotional needs, which we need, we are not androids. The sun is slightly more important than the moon because if you have a healthy sun, it is easier to get your emotional needs met than if you have a healthy moon, but your sun is hurting. It's harder to get your sanity needs met with a healthy moon than it is to get your emotional needs met with a healthy sun. Um, Traditionally, the moon is said to rule the day-to-day ebb and flow of the activity in our lives. She also rules day-to-day events on the earth, how things unfold, how a situation unfolds. She rules the ebb and flow of the ocean's tides. She also tugs on the fluids in every living body on the planet. And this was a surprise to me. She also tugs on the earth itself. Scientists doing an experiment managed to get very sensitive sound recording equipment down very deeply into a cave. Um, I don't recall how deep, but very deep. I think at least one of you have heard me talk about this before. Um, and they checked the recording equipment, which they left on for a lunar cycle, and discovered that when the moon was full and when the moon was new, when they turned up the volume on the recording, they could hear rocks creaking. So the moon pulls on the earth as well, which makes sense to me. They both have gravitational fields, and she is large enough and close enough that she pulls on more than just the water. Here, the water is just easier to move. Um, Emergency rooms, psychiatric hospitals, birthing centers, maternity wards tend to be busier under the full moon or the new moon because that pull of the moon probably has something to do with the water breaking, I would imagine. More babies are born under the full moon or the new moon. That's what happens in maternity wards. And I think for emergency rooms and psychiatric hospitals, when the moon is full, the high tides are extra high on the planet, but everybody's emotional tides are also running higher. We all tend to be a bit more emotional under the full moon. And if you're born under the full moon or the new moon, your emotions are sort of always on high tide. Um, Astrologers often abbreviate the full void of course moon phrase to the VC moon or the VOC moon or the capital V, small o, capital C moon. They all mean the void of course moon. We also call it the void moon sometimes rather than use the whole name. This is what it is. It begins when the moon makes its last Ptolemaic aspect, and those are the conjunction, the sextile, the square, the trine, and the opposition, to any other planet before it leaves its current sign and enters the next sign. It's as if the moon has run out of aspects when it doesn't have any more aspects to make in the sign it's in before it goes into the new one. It does not have any more Ptolemaic aspects. Let me stress that because it's important. Then the void of course moon ends as soon as the moon moves into the next sign of the zodiac, where it will have several Ptolemaical aspects lined up that it will make before it leaves there. Um, To work with the void of course moon, it will be helpful to have an astrological calendar or an ephemeris or astrological software that will show when the moon next becomes void of course. The last Ptolemaic aspect that the moon makes before it goes void, and when that aspect happens, and what that aspect is, that should have been on here. And it shows when the moon will enter its new sign and therefore end its void of course condition. And we'll get to the calendars before too long. They're probably the easiest thing for beginners to use, but you can also find this in an ephemeris. Or if money is tight, you can go to astrologycafe.com and go to the ephemeris for the current year. And you can print out all 12 months if you want to and fold them up and carry them around with you. You can also just look at them online. So there are lots of ways to get hold of this information. The void of course moon may last a few minutes or it may last a long time, many, many hours. It all depends on whether the other planets are early or late in the degrees of their signs, and it also depends how fast those planets move. The moon itself changes signs about every 2.5 days, and its rate of speed can vary. Typically, it moves about half a degree an hour. Over the course of 24 hours, it moves between 11 something to just over 15 something degrees a day. I think the average rate of speed is something like 13 and a half, 13 and a third degrees. But it fluctuates. Just the way it waxes and wanes, it speeds up and slows down. Those two are not linked together, but those are some of the ways that the moon changes form and also changes speed. Okay, why do we care about the void of course moon? Because when the moon is void of course, it is better not to start activities that you want to work out really well. Don't ask someone for a date. Don't ask someone to marry you. Do not get married. Do not buy a car. Do not apply for a job. Do not hire somebody. And we could go on. If you start something, oh my goodness, that's something, not some fig, under a void of course moon, you may put in a whole lot of effort that still does not result in that project finishing as you would like it to. So the traditional wisdom is that things started under a void of course moon tend not to work out, sometimes after long effort, but they tend not to work out as the doer would have preferred. I'm sure those of you who were around at the time remember 9/11 and the attack on the Twin Towers and on DC. Those attacks occurred when the moon was void of course. And the result was not what the attackers would have wanted. I'm sure they wanted to kill as many people as they could and to destroy important monuments and to upset the country. But they also, I think, wanted to provoke a global war. And that they did not do. It did not result in jihad and all of the radical Muslims on the planet joining under their banner. If you buy something under a void moon, you may find that it doesn't work as you expected either. Either as the object itself, it's defective, or you got the wrong object for what you wanted to do. For example, you bought paint to paint the kitchen under a void moon, and you get home and discovered, oh, this is flat and I need semi-gloss for the kitchen. There's nothing wrong with the paint, it just isn't appropriate to what you wanted to do with it. So this is extremely helpful when you're planning almost anything that will start at a specific time on a certain day. When you get a surprise invitation that you need to answer. If a new client wants to meet with you and you need to make an appointment, some people look at consultation charts for an appointment they've already set up with a new client, and some astrologers will very quickly go through their astrological software and find out if the date the client wants has a void moon or not. And since you want your relationship with your new client to work out well, it might be a good idea to make appointments when the moon is not void and for a time that the moon is not void. This is useful when you're job hunting, applying to a college, submitting plans to the county, making major important purposes, house hunting, car shopping, buying an extremely important and expensive object that you need to work well. I don't care if I'm buying a notebook under the void moon, so what? But if it's a computer, I definitely pay attention. Um, when you are deciding whether or not you want to take on a new project, say somebody calls you up and says, hey, I would like for you to give a lecture at this place, at this time, and on this topic. Would you like to do it? And if you grab your ephemeris, you can find out if the moon is void or not when you are being asked. If it's void, I'd say no. I'd also look for a better time. If the moon is not void and you'd like to do it, but the day that they've set up for you is not a good one because the moon is void all day, then you can ask for another date or time. It's good to know what the moon is going to be doing if you're going to have surgery. And sometimes when you want to make an appointment, you can't pick the exact time. Surgery is a prime example. Sometimes they tell you, okay, we'll operate, you have to be there at 5 in the morning and we'll operate on you between 6:30 and noon 30. And you don't know when. So you can't exactly do a full electional, which is running a chart for a time that will give you the best possible outcome for the surgery. And that's complicated and it takes some knowledge. But anybody who understands the void of course moon can grab their astrological calendar, look at the possible dates that they have been given and say, okay, that one will work because the moon is good all day. It doesn't matter if I get the operation at 6:30 or at 11:30 in the morning. The moon will still be okay. So it can definitely help you make plans. In the literature about the void of course moon, you'll see several things that astrologers like to quote. Nothing will come of the matter. Which is, say, if you apply for a job, you might get it, but you might leave the company and it might have been more trouble than it was worth. Or nothing to worry about. You see that more in orrery. Say you do an orrery and you are looking for your spouse because they're late coming home. If the moon is void, that tends to mean nothing to worry about. Sometimes it means nothing further will happen in this matter. Nothing else will happen. Nothing else will evolve. And the big one, the cliche, is avoid the void moon. Avoid the void of course moon. There are some exceptions. I just said I'd buy a notebook or a t-shirt under the void moon. The more important the activity is, the more it matters to you, the more attention you should pay to the moon's condition before you schedule the action or buy the object. If it's void, you might want to wait until the moon enters a sign where the last aspect it makes before it goes void again will be a good aspect. A trine, a sextile, or a conjunction to a planet that's appropriate to what you want to do. Therefore, it is important for your astrological calendar to say not just when the moon goes void, but what the last aspect it will make before it goes void, what that aspect is. Say somebody calls me and says, I'd like you to take on a book editing project. And I look at my calendar and I discover that the moon is void, so I don't want to say yes then. And I look at my calendar and discover that the next time it will make a good aspect before it goes void is sometime next week. And I might say, I'm really too busy to talk to you about this right now. I have a crazy week, but can we get together to talk about it on this day next week? So what can you use the void moon time for? Resting, regrouping, thinking, investigating things, downtime, reading, napping, studying, reviewing, mild exercise, visiting or calling friends or family for non-urgent matters, especially if it's the first time you speak to them about it. Daydreaming, yoga, meditation, cleaning and organizing, as long as it's not something that you can only do once and you cannot ever do it once you've finished. Practicing an instrument, playing with your pets, indulging in a hobby that you already have. It's not a great time to start a brand new hobby. And this is an interesting point. Starting or agreeing to something that you do not want to work out. You don't want anything else to come of the matter. Um, Say your great aunt Gertrude calls you and wants you to have dinner with her, and she is the most difficult person in the family. If she invites you when the moon is void, it's probably safe to agree because most likely that dinner will not happen. It will get rescheduled, it will get delayed. Great Aunt Gertrude will have a conflict. Or say that you are unfortunately involved in a lawsuit and your opponent in the lawsuit got to schedule the court date. You didn't. Um, if it's scheduled for a time when the moon is void, then the void of course moon is their void moon because they scheduled it, and they are the people who will have that have that trial not work out as they want it to. Things will not work out well for the person who scheduled the event under the void moon. You can probably think of other examples. A lot of astrologers I know will file their income tax returns when the moon is void because they do not want anything else to come of the matter. They don't want to get audited. Okay, calendars. Llewellyn's daily planetary guide or wall calendar are both good astrological calendars. There are also private individuals, small companies who will customize the calendar for you and for where you are living. And those calendars can include when such and such a planet is affecting a planet in your birth chart. But unless you get a custom ordered one, they don't do that. You can also get them digitally if you'd rather just keep it on your phone. Wise Skies does a digital astrological calendar you can download to your phone. There are other digital astrological calendars out there. Wise Skies makes two, and I always get both of them because one of them shows the void moon and the other ones don't. Make sure before you get a calendar or buy an ephemeris that you've looked at it carefully to make sure that it has the information you need about the void moon. And we'll be looking at pictures from calendars in just a minute. There are lots of online ephemerides, which is a $5 word that is the plural of ephemeris. I've already mentioned cafe astrologies. For hard copy, I've used the American ephemeris for a long time. And that comes, or it used to come, by the decade, by the half century, or by the century. Okay, this is from Llewellyn's Daily Planetary Guide 2025 for last month. If you look at Monday, May 19th, and you will see the aspects that the moon is making that day and what time she makes them. Eastern time is on the left for Llewellyn and Pacific is on the right. That's why there are two times listed. And they're meant basically for Americans. I suppose if we all lived in Europe, there would be astrological calendars you could get that were set for Greenwich or not. So you don't have to think about the void of course moon on the 19th, but what is the last aspect the moon will make when it next goes void? So here you see the moon symbol VC, and I've marked those with red so it's easy to see on the page. That's what you're scanning down the page for. So the moon went void at 4:59 in the morning Pacific time on Tuesday, May 20th. And the last aspect it made before it went void was a square to the sun in Taurus. That means that when it enters the next sign, it would have to enter Gemini. Excuse me. Oh, that's Moon Aquarius squares the sun in Taurus. Sun in Taurus, sorry. So the moon is in Aquarius, and it will be entering the next sign, Pisces, at 5:28 in the morning. So that's 29 minutes, about half an hour of a void moon that we dealt with in late May that month. Not very long. Sometimes it's a whole lot longer. Does the moon go void on the 21st? Anybody? No.
No, 22nd.
Yeah, it does go void on the 22nd. What is the last aspect it makes before it goes void? And you can see it this time because I didn't draw the red line through the column on the left.
Conjunct Saturn and Pisces.
Mm-hmm. It sure does. And it goes void at 9:05 in the morning Pacific, and then it goes into Aries. Oh, that's 9:06. 20 minutes later. Okay. Does it go void on the 23rd?
No.
Nope. This extra line is drawn down here because in some parts of they had too much activity apparently to put up here. So you can ignore that when you see it. So here's the void of course moon, which happens when Pacific?
7:44.
7:44 Eastern, 4:40.
Oh, that's either. And then, okay, I see.
It doesn't matter. It's just that
Yep.
when you see two sets, usually one is in one time zone and one is one in the other. If you see plain type and boldface type. So the last aspect that it made before it went void was to a sextile to Jupiter. Sextile to Jupiter in Gemini.
Well, that's a nice aspect.
Yeah, the moon's in Aries. It sextiles Jupiter in Gemini is the last aspect it makes, and it continues void for a little longer than it has before. Almost 6 hours when it enters Taurus, the next sign after Aries, at 10:38 in the morning Pacific or 1:38 in the afternoon Eastern. Here's another page of Llewellyn's Daily Planetary Guide from the bottom, because I just wanted to show you that you will see in most calendars what time the boldface is and what time the plain face is for the type. This is also a handy thing. You can see 3 months, last month, this month, and the next one down at the bottom of the calendar. Well, what if you end up using an ephemeris instead? This is the American ephemeris for April 2025. First, ephemerises are usually set up for Greenwich Mean Time, and they are set up for midnight or noon Greenwich Mean Time. So you need to know what time zone you are in and how far away it is from Greenwich Mean Time. This ephemeris I got because I was living in the Eastern time zone when I got it. And Eastern Daylight Time is 4 hours earlier than Greenwich. And that made it a lot easier to talk to my time twin in Scotland because they were just 4 hours later than we were. Now it's a lot harder because he's 8 hours later than I am. So find out whether you're looking at a midnight or a noon ephemeris and find out what time zone it's set up for. This is midnight, meaning that the sun, which is listed on the 1st of April at 11 degrees Aries, 40 minutes, 46 seconds. That's where it was at midnight Greenwich time. So those positions are accurate for 4 hours before Greenwich or 8 in the evening in the US on the day before. So 8 in the evening, March 31st is what this works for. You don't have to do a lot of toing and froing up here. I was just felt like I should explain what you're looking at. And you're not going to see under the moon when it goes void because they had to make a whole table for you. If you'd ever seen an ephemeris before, Mercury was retrograde at the beginning of April 2025, and it went direct on April 7th at 8 in the evening at 2651 Pisces. Okay, this is what I wanted to show you. Lunar ingresses and void moons. Ingress just means that the moon has entered a sign. So the ingresses are on the left. That's when it enters the new sign. And you're looking at both columns. But to find when the moon is void, you look at void times. So on April 3rd at 2:26 in the afternoon Eastern, the moon went void, and the last thing it did was to square Mercury. So we don't know when it enters the next sign. And if we go over here, we will see that at 6:49 in the evening, the moon will enter Cancer. So you look for when did the moon go void and what was its last aspect and when does it enter the next sign. If you're confused, look at the times. You're seeing the 3rd on both days here, but it goes void at 2:26 and it goes into the next sign at 6:49. So these are quite useful. Good ephemeris will show you what planets make stations that month, what planets move into signs, what signs and when, on what days that month, and what the moon phases are, again, for Eastern Daylight Time. So we had a full moon on the 12th and a new moon on the 27th, and it gives you what degrees these happened in. No solar eclipses, no lunar eclipses, but if we had had any that month, it would have been listed. So you could, if you want to print this out from Astrology Cafe or Cafe Astrology, and get 12 months, 12 pieces of paper, and print the whole thing out and carry around with you. I would recommend that you carry the whole page because if you just clip off the bottom, you've got all this information, but you don't know what month it is. And this is the voice of experience. I'm absent-minded, and I have been known to do this over the course of my 42 years doing readings. So don't be like me. Keep the whole thing. Don't cut it up. Okay, this is how you get hold of me. I'm at Post Office Box 1311, Ramona, California, and email is a good way to reach me. Jodie Ty, that's my legal married name. My professional name is still Forrest. And that is my telephone. It's a North Carolina exchange, but I am now in California. I want to leave some of this up so that you can take a look at what the moon is doing when, and then we can go back to the ephemeris page. Somebody tell me what aspect the moon made on the 22nd, which was a Thursday, at 2:27 in the morning Eastern Time. What aspect did the moon make?
It squared Jupiter.
It was in Pisces and it made a square to Jupiter and Gemini. When did it go void, Eastern?
12:06 p.m.
Uh-huh. Okay. Actually, where was I here? The last aspect it made before it went void, as we've looked at already, is a conjunction to Saturn. When does it enter Aries?
12:26 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay. Let's look at a different day. What is the last aspect the moon made before it went void?
Let's see. Do you want some of these, Melody Ann?
Sure, I'll take this one. Moon in Aries, sextile Jupiter and Gemini.
Okay, you got it. Good for you.
I
And
have a calendar.
when does it enter Taurus?
1:38 p.m. Eastern.
Okay. Now I want to tell you some real life stories about the void of course moon. I applied for a job that I wanted under a void moon, and it did not work out, and I ended up leaving voluntarily after several months. This is before I knew about the void moon. A friend of mine is a contractor who builds houses, and he came over for band practice one night and was telling us about this contract he had just signed to build a great big house on a great big lot in Chatham County, which is near where I used to live in North Carolina. And he noticed that my ex's faces and I looked a little different, and he said, "What? What is it?" And he had set this up on one of those days when the moon was void all day long. So we explained about the void of course moon, and we should have had better facial control, but we just didn't because we weren't in client mode. We were in band practice mode. So, control of the face had sort of gone out the window. So we explained to him and said, anything else you have to sign that's legal, pick a good moon. This is how you find them. And explained it to him. And he was hoping that things could go well. And we got reports along the way. She wound up being the client from hell. She changed a lot of things after they'd already been done and objected to paying for their being redone, which is normal when you ask somebody to redo work when it wasn't the person's fault, when it wasn't the doer's fault that it needed to be redone. And then houses built, she's moved in. He thinks he's finally rid of her, and came over at band practice exulting about it. And then a couple weeks later, she calls him and says, "This house is haunted and it's your fault." How a brand new house on a vacant lot could be haunted is one question, but how it could be the builder's fault. It was irrational. There's not much you can do about an irrational complaint, but if she had taken him to court saying my house is haunted and it's his fault, I don't think it would have gotten very far. What else? I've had objects I was worried about having lost for good, and when I've done an orrery, which is casting a chart for a question, when the astrologer first totally understands the nature of the question, and if this is the most efficient way to ask the question or not. For example, somebody says, should I quit my job? And what they're actually thinking when you find out when you interview them is, it isn't so much, should I quit this job? It's, if I quit this job now, will this other job I have applied for hire me? So the more efficient question there is, will this other place hire me? If they hire you, then automatically you would quit the old job to go to the new one. So astrologers can save clients a lot of time and a lot of extra orrery questions just by talking to them and making sure they understand the question behind the question, if there is one. So I have lost things and done an orrery and looked at the moon, and it was void, and I thought, okay, nothing to worry about. I will find it again. And then I looked at the first house. Neptune was rising, which tends to mean that the person asking the question is absent-minded and has mislaid the object. So it's a little annoying to have a chart show you that. But I said, okay, I will find it because it's still in the house and I just put it someplace different. And it said it was near exercise equipment and near glass. So I knew, and on the western side of the house, which is where our room was, and I worked out with a weight set by the window of that room. And there it was, what I had lost, right smack there on the weight set. So I didn't need to worry about it. Then there was a friend of mine I had explained about the void moon to, and she and her partner were going to buy the brownstone that they had been renting in Brooklyn, in New York City. And she told me the day that they were going to do the signing, and I looked it up and said, you really need to sign all the papers and have it legalized within 15 minutes of sitting down, because that's when the moon goes void. And she said, oh, I can do that. I can just tell them I want to sign right away. And I said, well, what if they ask why? And she says, oh, they know I'm weird. I'm just going to say my astrologer told me to. So she goes to the meeting and pipes up and says, my astrologer wants me to sign these papers right at the beginning of the meeting. Does anyone mind if we do that? They all said, oh, okay. Silly little woman, we will sign the papers when you want them signed. So they did. And not long after that, their landlord insisted that they pay him for damages to the brownstone that had been there when they moved in. And they had recorded this. They're smart people and they're filmmakers, so they recorded everything. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. It was like that when we moved in. He said, well, I can prove that you did it, and this sale is over and I'm leaving. And he gets out and starts to stomp out of the room. His lawyer grabs his wrist and said, we have signed those papers. You're not going anywhere. And they're right. The damage was there beforehand and they are not going to pay you for it. But if they hadn't signed the papers right at the beginning of the meeting and the guy had stormed out, they would have had a lot of trouble closing the sale that day. So it's a useful thing to know about. I know there's a lot here and we've looked at a lot and we may have gone over terms you're not totally familiar with. So if you have questions about anything, if there's a slide you'd like me to go back to, now's a good time to ask.
I'd like to share an experience I had with the void of course moon.
Oh, good. Tell us.
I was working at a company and I got a call out of the blue from my boss, and she wanted to know if I would be willing to go on a business trip to Atlanta. She needed to know right then and there. Now, I have 7 fixed planets. I do not make snap decisions, but she was pressuring me and I agreed. And I never got into this trip. I just wanted it to be over with. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, wait a minute, let me go check my ephemeris. And sure enough, the moon was void, of course, when I had to agree to go on this trip. And it was a great lesson for me to understand how this works in everyday life.
Did the trip happen?
Yes, it did. And it was a very interesting time when I had to actually travel, because there were 5 planets retrograde at the time. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. I got to the airport, but on the way back, they changed our exit gate because our plane was there, but the plane before it was blocking the gate. So our plane couldn't get there. And after, I think it was an hour, they finally decided, well, we're going to call in a temp crew or a substitute crew. Well, that's a great idea. Then they told us, because we were delayed for so long, that we missed our connecting flight. They were like, just, deal with it. You missed your connecting flight. And, it was just one thing after another. And then when I actually got on the plane, I got to my destination where I was connecting, And they said, oh no, that plane's still on the ground. So they run over to the plane and actually got on the plane. I'm getting home at 12:30 in the morning, and well, they got me on the plane, but my luggage, not so much.
Mm.
So they had to deliver my luggage to me the next day. I mean, it was just the craziest thing to watch astrology work.
Yeah. Yeah, I often say that for people who don't believe in astrology, I want them to just follow retrograde Mercury and the void of course moon for a little while. Not long either.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, some of this stuff you couldn't make up. You just couldn't. And
Yeah, I was just glad to be home.
I use it when I'm booking plane trips. I use it for pretty much anything important, including having complicated and possibly difficult conversations.
I like the tip about using the void of course moon if you don't want anything to come of the situation. That's a good way to use it.
Yeah. Well, as one of my clients said one day, every front has a back. And there is a way that you can work with it when you don't want something to happen. And I would not guarantee that in every case the thing you don't want to happen will not happen. But as I've worked with it that way, it's been pretty consistent.
I had a friend who was mentioned to me in passing she was set to sign some legal papers, and I knew Mercury was retrograde. I said, you might want to reschedule that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And she did.
Good. There is some controversy about how far a planet has to move after its stationary direct before it's considered to be totally out of retrograde. And for some people, Mercury has to leave the degree it went direct in. Even if it went direct at 2859 and then it automatically goes to 29 very soon. It's when it leaves the degree it went direct in. For some astrologers, it's when it goes one full degree past where it went direct.
So are you talking about the shadow period?
I've never found the shadow period works for me.
I don't use them either. And I've talked to people, that swear by them. And I said, look, Mercury goes retrograde 4 times a year for 3 weeks. That's enough. I don't need to extend that 3-week period of time to 8 weeks. 3 weeks of Mercury retrograde is plenty. You do you, but I'm not going to worry about the shadow period.
Yeah. Yeah, I have not found the shadow period to be applicable in my practice, and somebody else might. That's one of the strange things about it.
Glad to have your confirmation on that.
Why do some people swear by one house system and other people swear by a totally different one? And
they all have the right answer.
Person. I think if you use Placidus, the universe tends to cooperate by sending you clients whose charts fit them in Placidus. I realize that sounds extremely woo-woo, but that's the only explanation I've been able to come up with.
I tried whole sign houses. I really, really tried. For 3 weeks, I tried. And I was like, I can't do this. I just can't do this. Whole sign houses move 7 of my planets.
Yeah.
That's a lot of change for someone who has a lot of fixed in their chart.
Was it the fixed planets that whole sign moved?
I think it was, now that you mention it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Whole sign, I think is really good to learn in because it helps you with aspects. And some astrologers who do traditional work will use whole sign. I use Placidus probably because that's what I started with, and the charts of people I know well seem to fit them better in Placidus than in other house systems. But I definitely see astrologers for whom a different house system works better, and it's their practice. They should do what they feel works best for them.
it's a slippery slope when you're teaching,
Mhm.
because you know there are a lot of people who can't identify hard aspects,
Yeah.
and they try to count houses. And I got into a heated discussion with someone one time when I was presenting, and she tried to tell me that there was a planet in the ninth house and a planet in the first house. And she said, that's a trine. I said, no, that's a square. I said,
Oh
no,
gosh.
this one's
Yeah.
in Pisces and this one's in Sagittarius. That is not a trine. That is a square.
Absolutely.
And she was quite adamant that it was a trine. I was like, okay, we got to go back to basics here and talk about cardinal fixed immutable. Let's hash this out, because you need to
Between 90 and
understand.
120 degrees. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you will, that does happen. Sometimes you bump into clients who, I'm trying to think of a kind way to say this, don't know quite as much as they think they do. And that's probably
Yeah,
any field,
exactly.
in any field. Um, so this is last fall, the fall before, I was working with a woman in Missouri, and I ran her birth chart. She was born in Missouri, and she got in touch and said, you gave me the wrong ascendant. And she said, also, I wasn't born at standard time. I was born at daylight time.
She might not know.
No, she didn't know. And she said, I did this on my own astrology program. I said, which one? And it was one of the very basic ones. And I said, how old is it? And she said, oh, I don't know, 15 years. And I said, well, they're always looking at the ephemerises for the time zones that they program into astrological software. If you look at, say, the bottom screen, if you use Solar Fire, it will let you know when updates happen. And one of the things that happens when you download an update is it probably updates the atlas, the time zone atlas that's in your program. And she was still having problems. And I said, well, this past September, was daylight time in effect in St. Louis? And she said, well, yes, after the 3rd. And I said, well, you were born after 1968, which is when time zones got pretty well standardized. Therefore, it was the same situation the year that you were born. And I had to finally, I said, okay, I'm going to check in with several of my colleagues. And because she just didn't believe me. So I checked in with several colleagues, and they all bore me out with expressions of sympathy I didn't pass on. And I got back everybody's findings to her and had her look at timeanddate.com online to see about when time zones change. And it's different all over the world. Not everybody does it the way the US does it. But you will bump into that sometimes. So when you ask clients for birth data, it can be a good idea to say, don't correct or amend the time zone that you were given. Just put it month, day, year, time, place. And I have the material in which I can look up the time zone.
I had a friend who they were doing a study with one of the books that my teacher had written about diurnal charts, which are daily charts. So you can watch your ascendant move throughout the year. And she said, well, it's not right. And I said, yes, it is. So she was born, I think, around the middle of March. And I said, when you were born, you were in standard time. Now that they changed daylight savings time, now you're in daylight savings. She could not understand why it didn't work. I said, there's nothing wrong with the book.
Yep.
It's the time change, the extension of the time change.
Yeah. And then there are years where, say, in early 1974, they changed the time zones because it was the energy crisis.
Yeah, I remember that too. I mean, when you had to do create astrology charts by hand, you had to know these things.
Yes, you did. You could look up, there were time zone atlases that were hard copy, and you could look this up in. But they would issue amendments and corrections all the time to those all the time. It's easier now that we're working mostly online.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Then there are parts of the country that didn't know if they wanted to be in Eastern or Central, and didn't know if they wanted it to be daylight or standard, and that's the black hole of Indiana and Illinois.
Yeah.
If somebody says the chart is wrong and they were born in Indiana or Illinois, I will do a whole lot of ferreting around to try to find out if they are accurate or not. That's the one that we are still figuring out. So good observation.
Thank you.
Teresa, can you think of any void of course moon situations that you know of? You may not, I don't know.
I have heard of the void of course moon stuff, but I haven't applied it yet.
Mhm.
I'm definitely going to starting now and pay more attention to it.
Very, very useful.
If you ever get the Daily Planetary Guide by Llewellyn,
Mhm.
in the more recent years, they actually have a one pager that has all of the void of course moons times for the year.
Mhm.
I have a honeycomb planner that has
Okay.
that's personalized for me, and it has all in there. So
Okay, good.
I have the info.
What is
I
it?
just have to start using
Cafe
it.
Astrology is really good, and another one that I love is AstroSeek.
Mhm. Yeah, we have lots and lots of resources now that we didn't have when I first started.
Before the internet.
Before the internet and before computers. Yeah, I learned how to cast charts by hand, and I'm glad I had that knowledge. I think it's important to know how you do it, but I haven't done one by hand in a long time.
Yep, I learned by hand.
I think it's good to learn by hand.
It was fun to watch my chart unfold.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely.
And when you set up transits and progressions by hand, that's also interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see it takes time to do all this setup. So you can be watching what happens and seeing if what you need to talk about for that client is what you thought you would need to talk about for that client or not. So there's something to be said for it, but
There's value to it for sure.
Would rather have the faster way.
I like the computers myself, but I think it's really important. I think not enough people understand where the sun is supposed to be based on what time you were born.
Mhm.
So, it's really easy to see if you put in PM and it should have been AM, we can tell if the chart is wonky, where some people don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. A birth chart is kind of like a very crude solar clock.
Yes.
And once you understand that,
Mm-hmm.
I think falls into place a little better. Okay. I am doing a chart delineation session on Friday, July 11th. And I've done a couple of those, and I've talked about how to organize a reading, as in what you talk about before what, before what, before what next, before what next. I want to be available and accessible to students, and I'm curious what some of your chart delineation issues are that it would help you if I talked about, so that I can aim the July 11th talk for some useful material.
For me, I really want to start to understand storytelling, how to speak non-astrologer to folks rather than go, oh my goodness, Mars is on your ascendant. How can I weave that into a cohesive story rather than just kind of picking things out that pop out at me?
I teach a whole course about that. It's a professional studies module 5, storytelling.
Okay.
So you will get to that, but there are certainly some quick and dirty things I can talk about in 90 minutes just to get your pump primed. Okay.
I think the order of things to go through, what to start with would be good.
Okay.
Like the ordering of it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's not a right or wrong way to approach a reading. Um, what I think about is sun, moon, ascendant first. Sometimes it's sun, ascendant, moon, but I always do sun, moon, ascendant, and any conjunctions to them before I do anything else. If you can get a good grasp on the sun, moon, and ascendant, you can help somebody. Even if that's all you talk about, you can help somebody. I do talk about the whole chart, but starting with sun, moon, ascendant is a good idea. And that way you've got the basic structure of the chart firmly fixed in both of your minds before you get into more detail. And same thing with current events readings. I look at the sun chunk of aspects and the moon chunk of events and the ascendant chunk of events before I talk about anything else. Because they are such fundamental building blocks of the chart. So I'll always go there. When you're doing dynamic events readings, you need to choose whether you're going to organize by planet. What planet do you talk about? By theme. Is there a theme of freedom versus relationship in this person's chart right now? Is there a theme of work-life balance in this person's chart right now? Some people just organize the planets into the themes that they see. And some people organize it chronologically. This happens before this, before this, before this. That's more complicated because some aspects last a lot longer than others, which is probably why I decided to organize by planet. If several things are happening with a planet, you start with the chronologically earliest one because the others will build on it. Okay. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about that would be helpful?
Yep.
Okay. Stories personify the planets. If you have a whole list of personifications you can apply to a planet, you're in good shape. So Pluto might be Darth Vader. Pluto might be Hades, Lord of the Underworld. Pluto might be the Grim Reaper. Pluto might be a mafia don, or an assassin, or a convict. All the planets are personifiable. So you come up with a basic human type, and you have, say, skewed it a little bit according to what sign that planet is in, but you have a character, you have a mafia don. And if the sun is in Scorpio, he will be a rather different mafia don than if the sun were in Cancer. So the planet is the character, the sign is what they want, what they need, how they go about getting it. The house is where that planet lives, either the house they're in natally or the houses they're going through. So that's your stage setting. It's like inventing a script. The planets are the actors, the signs are the script, and the houses are the stage settings. Okay. Anything else that would be helpful to address when I'm doing a chart delineation coaching session? You can go deep into the weeds. You can say, I don't know how to talk about planet A square planet B. That one has always bothered me. Or I don't think I have any grasp on the water houses. Okay. So this has given me good things to think about. And we have a little time left if you have any more questions about today's topic or astrology in general, or ideas about what delineation information would help you.
Do you typically do like lunar node stuff in an initial reading?
Well, I'm an evolutionary astrologer, so I do.
Okay, I just love the lunar node stuff, so I was just curious.
Evolutionary astrologers think that the moon's nodes have a very specific meaning. They're about your past, and whether it's your karmic past because of many lifetimes, or whether it's a psychological inheritance from your extended family and your ancestors is open to interpretation. Either way, the South Node tends to be about the past, and you're used to it and you may be good at it, but it might not help you grow as much as the North Node does. So I apply storytelling techniques to the nodes, the nodal structure, South Node, any conjunctions, ruler, House of South Node, North Node, any conjunctions to it, ruler, House of North Node, House of ruler. And is there anything squaring the nodes, for example? And that will get woven into the story too. So not all astrologers talk about the nodes at all, and not all astrologers talk about them the same way. But I'm primarily an evolutionary astrologer. I can also switch and be a modern psychological astrologer if people don't want to hear anything about karma. It's easier, to my mind, to come up with stories if you're talking about karma and somebody's karmic past, or things their ancestors learned, things their ancestors never learned, is another way to talk about it.
Interesting. My nodes are Virgo and Pisces, so I'm like in the thick of it right now with a nodal return coming sometime very soon. So, and I think I have leanings towards the evolutionary stuff too, because I love the nodal stuff.
Mhm.
Just seems to work for me.
Was it a Virgo South Node?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, those nodal returns are powerful times. So are nodal oppositions. And people we meet who have the same nodes as we do or opposite nodes we do tend to be valuable for us. Because we can each help each other with the unfamiliar North Node because it's the other person's South Node.
I had my son when I was 19, so he has the same nodes I have, so I think that's interesting.
Uh-huh. If you'd had him when you were 27, 28, you probably would have had the opposite nodes.
Yep.
They have an 18-year orbit, so they reverse their positions every 9.5 years. Okay, so, and sometimes I talk about the nodal story at the very beginning of the reading and then talk about the sun, what they're learning, as what they're doing now because of those nodes. More often, I tell the nodal story at the end of the reading because by then I've established enough rapport to know which of 2 or 3 stories I pre-prepared might be more identifiable with by them than the other stories. If your client is an athlete and one of your stories involved an athlete, I will probably pick the story that involved an athlete in the nodes, if your client is already an athlete. You also have time to analyze what is this person's vocabulary level like? And are they scared of the reading? Are they scared of the information? How anxious are they or not? All these things sort of go into which of the nodal stories I've prepared I'll end up using. Then I'll probably tell them about the other one just to show that we're talking about themes when we talk about the nodes, and more than one story can illustrate the same themes. Okay. Any other questions?
Not tonight, but this has been delightful.
Okay, great. I'm glad to hear it, Melody Ann. And please tell The other people who signed up for the course, I don't know if they were trying to get into the room or not, but there will be a recording. And they can get hold of the recording. And we are still kind of getting the bugs out about Luke's Zoom account that we teach in. Some of us, for some of us, it still gives us a bit of trouble, or we have to get into the classroom a slightly different way each time. So apologies if people went out and did not come back in, but they will have recordings. Okay, I hope to see you on July 11th, and best of luck with your studies, and please feel free to get in touch with me if I can ever help you in any way. And that's the
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, thank you, Melody, and it's a pleasure to meet you. And I already knew Teresa because I had taught her a course.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I love doing this. So I hope our paths cross again soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.